and welcome to my presentation entitled Replacing Pedagogy with the Mwalimu Training Model of Ubuntugogi, a situational analysis presented by Anitra Butler Ngugi. Now, according to Bangura, a situational analysis is a variation of grounded theory that seeks to extend Anselm Strauss's ecological social worlds, arenas, or discourses framework. Now, this analysis opens by listing the major elements of concern in teacher and professor education while conducting an analysis of relations among the key concerns. This analysis differentiates pedagogy from ubuntugogi in order to frame and identify key interpretations of the current situation. Finally, this researcher will suggest an innovative approach to the problem that may help meet the need. Let's start by examining the group. We have college professors, in-service teachers, pre-service teachers, all of African descent that have been miseducated by the European university, which operates within the colonial matrix of power. Now, let's look at the problem. The systematic extinction of the rich African indigenous knowledge systems was facilitated by coloniality, modernity, and globalization. Europe's need to structure the world order established their colonial power matrix, which is still in use today. The matrix consists of four interrelated domains. They include control of the economy, control of authority, control of gender and sexuality, and control of knowledge and subjectivity. At the base of the colonial matrix of power lies a racialized and patriarchal foundation of knowledge. Therefore, the European episteme is based on the systematic repression of specific beliefs, ideas, images, symbols, or knowledge that were not useful to global colonial domination. European pedagogy and European curriculum continues the systematic repression of indigenous African knowledge. Now, the context. Think about the following as a part of the context that we're operating in. Global linear thinking, an outgrowth of Western civilization, impacted the competence of the knowledge and subjectivity of indigenous African knowledge systems. Europeans have ranked and ordered all forms of human knowledge on epistemological scales, from the traditional to the modern, from barbarianism to civilization, from the community to the individual, from the Orient to the Occident. By way of this strategy, scientific thought positions itself as the only valid form of producing knowledge, and Europe acquires an epistemological hegemony over all the other cultures of the world. Now, many professors, pre-service, and in-service teachers find themselves assisting with the proliferation of global linear thinking. Europe succeeded in imposing a mirage upon the practical totality of the cultures that it colonized, and much more. This chimera, or fabrication of the mind, is still so attractive to so many. Let's look at the history. Let's take a deeper dive here. The colonizers imposed a mystified image of their own patterns of producing knowledge and meaning. This pattern manifested itself in the form of pedagogy. This mechanical instructional approach produced oppressive conditions and learner dependency. At first, they placed their knowledge producing system far out of reach of the dominated. Later, they taught them in a partial and selective way in order to co opt some of the dominated into their own power institutions. Then, European culture was made seductive. It gave access to power. Hence, cultural Europeanization was transformed into an aspiration. It was a way of participating and later to reach the same material benefits and the same power as the Europeans, these to conquer nature, in short, for development. European culture became a universal culture. Now, let's look at the history of the problem closer. Giraud conceptualized pedagogy as the production of knowledge, learning, academic labor, social relations, and democracy itself. He purported that pedagogy offers a discourse of possibility and a way of providing students with the opportunity to link understanding to commitment and social transformation to seeking the greatest possible justice. Hence, for years, instruction, enculturation, and indoctrination of the colonized have been done using instructional approaches of teaching and learning rooted in an Aryan worldview. Let's take a look at the anatomy of pedagogy. Pedagogy is comprised of instruction, content, assessment, and environment. Under instruction, we note that pedagogy tends to be unconscious instruction, mechanical, anti-intellectual, subjugative, manipulative, text-based, authoritarian, standardization, top-down, rote memorization, and punishment. Now, under content, we notice that it uses Western constructs, it's exclusive, it has a narrow base on European particularities. It's multidisciplinary, but taught in isolation. It's inductive in form, it's meaningless, and it's direct in its communicative form. Now, for assessment, we notice that it is biased because it is looking for predetermined responses. It ranks people. It uses summative and formative assessment. It's shallow, provides shallow feedback. The assessment can be punitive and life affecting. It uses norm reference, comparing you to others, and criterion reference, comparing you to a standard. Thus, the individual is being compared to some external factor. And finally, the environment. Within pedagogy, the environment is controlled and it uses operant conditioning. You've probably heard of behaviorist learning theories. It's oppressive. It promotes dependency. It promotes individualism. It promotes competitiveness in an individualistic way. It's artificial. It's compulsory. It's institutionalized. And it uses false meritocracy. So what is the educational end with pedagogy? Well, the end result is skilled workers for corporations, dependence on a modern centralized economy, and a monoculture of urban consumers. So hence, pedagogy focuses on skill development, which is manifested through the tooling function. So it's focusing on providing knowledge and skills that will enable you to use specific tools, whether it be a computer, whether it be writing, whether it be communication, whether it be behavior. All of it is working together to develop those skills that corporations want. Now let's look at some solutions here. Freire's critical pedagogy applies critical theory to instruction. Critical pedagogy plays a vital role in both understanding and challenging how power, knowledge, and values are deployed, affirmed, and resisted within and outside traditional discourses and cultural spheres. Giro's Pedagogy of Resistance submitted that any viable pedagogy of resistance needs to create the educational and pedagogical tools to produce a radical shift in consciousness, capable of both recognizing the scorched earth policies of gangster capitalism and the twisted ideologies that support it. In other words, pedagogies of resistance enables the public to imagine a life beyond a social order in which racial, class, and gender-based violence produce endless assaults on the environment and enable systemic police violence, a culture of ignorance and cruelty. Given's fugitive pedagogy is a social and rhetorical frame by which Black Americans' pursuit to enact humanizing and affirming practices of teaching and learning can be interpreted. And Asante's revolutionary pedagogy employs Africological, chematological, and rhetorical techniques within its instructional framework. Now, although each of these pedagogical approaches offers some benefits to African learners, they all inadvertently leave out a key ingredient that is necessary for the African learner's success, and that is religiosity, the core of African humanism. Now, let's look at what really needs to happen. To liberate the production of knowledge, reflection, and communication from the pitfalls of European rationality and modernity, we must employ Afrocentric instructional design models and Afrocentric instructional resources and materials. What is more, a massive re-education process is necessary. This is not to happen in the Europeans' university, but in the Africans' pluriversity, where all perspectives are reviewed and studied. African professors, African teachers, and African teacher educators must replace pedagogy with an Afrocentric instructional design model that is culturally specific and culturally relevant for African learners, known as ubuntugogical. Ubuntugogical is an African educational paradigm rooted in African humanism. The tenets of religiosity, consensus building, and dialogue provides the needed foundational methods to Africanize the curricula, and instead of using the European word curricula, we will use the Kemetic word sabait, thus creating a pathway where Africans can once again think with our African minds. Now, ubuntugogical was created by Dr. Abdul Karim Bangura. Ubuntugogical transcends pedagogy, andragogy, ergonagy, and heutagogy. Bangura submitted after almost 3 centuries of employing Western educational approaches, many African societies are still characterized by low Western literacy rates, civil conflicts, and underdevelopment. The salvation for Africans hinges upon employing indigenous African educational paradigms, which can be subsumed under the rubric of ubuntugogical, which Bangura defined as the art and science of teaching and learning undergirded by humanity towards others. So, let's look at why we need to shift to ubuntugogical. Recall, It is an African educational paradigm rooted in African humanism. So we have three tenets. We have the tenet of religiosity, consensus building, and dialogue. The first tenet, religiosity, has nothing to do with religion, nothing at all to do with religion. If you look at the word religiosity, within it we get religio, which is derived from the Latin and Greek roots of obligation, bond, reverence, religare, to bind. So religiosity means to bind together through our Africanity. It means to behave in a straight, upright, just way in all of our deeds and in all of our behavior. Staying balanced on the V of life, trying to be as perfect of a human as we can. We are all one by way of the human biogenetic rope. Hence, we must treat each other with the highest regard, because the way you treat your brother is how you treat yourself, because we are all one. And so when we look at the straight, upright, just way of doing things, that is based on the Kemetic philosophy of Ma'at, where we have truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, and order. The second tenet, consensus building, that allows one to acknowledge our coexistence. It denounces the ego. It has a cooperative spirit. It's about making collective decisions, group decisions, what's best for the group, letting the people decide, having genuine motives, sharing values, interests, and principles based on Ma'at, and striving for group agreement and harmony. Consensus building is very important because it ultimately leads to one's politics. And the third tenet, dialogue, valuing deliberations, absence of timekeeping, allowing for extended talk. This diminishes chaos. Dialogue also brings about transpersonal communication, connecting with others on the cosmic level, where you see the divine in me and I see the divine in you. I see you as a living soul. Dialogue with others promotes trust and understanding. Dialogue within self promotes reflection and intuition. It allows you to tap into that cosmic level. Cosmic dialogue promotes deep thought through prayer. Some would say it allows you to pipe into God's mind. Then we have intergenerational dialogue with our family, extended families, elders, leaders, masters, and heroes. And then we have dialogue with our ancestors. Dialogue with our ancestors helps retrieve our collective memory. Dialogue with our ancestors happens via dreams and memories. So ubuntugogi brings back the spirit of Ubuntu. A person becomes human only in the midst of others and seeks both individual and collective harmony as the primary task in the process of becoming a true person, a human. Pedagogy fails to teach this as it replaces morality with materialism, keeping individuals in a savage, barbarian state. So if we look at the anatomy of ubuntugogi, recall that these elements of teaching and studying and learning include instruction, content, assessment, and environment. So under instruction, we have conscious instruction, intentional, intellectual, redeeming, sincere. It's contextualized, cooperative, Ubuntu in nature, and humane correction. Under content, we get indigenous constructs, inclusive in nature, broad, including perspectives from all cultures, interdisciplinary, where we integrate all of the disciplines as a totality to study. It's meaningful and it's indirect in its communicative form. It tends to be very proverbial, requiring the learner to really think. Now, for assessments, we have performance-based assessments, readiness assessments based on your stage of development. If you're ready to be initiated into the next stage, we have reflection happening. Assessment is ongoing. It can be given by your peers as well as adults. It's meaningful feedback. It promotes self-evaluation as well, and teacher or peer support happens when areas of weaknesses are discovered. Now, within the environment, you're situated in an authentic environment that connects to your everyday life. You're in an emancipative environment, self-determining. This environment promotes agency. It promotes communal interactions. It is non-conditional. There's no conditioning happening. There's no manipulating happening. It is non-competitive. And if you're competing, it's to be the leader of the group. So there may be some games where the children play and whoever wins those games becomes the leader, but that person is now responsible for the group. It promotes autonomy and it asks for your consent because this is for the good of the group. So we need you to consent to be a part of this. It is localized. It has nothing to do with areas that you can't relate to. It's all central and local around you being an African, me being an African within an African context. Thus, it's very egalitarian in nature. So what is the educational end? Well, for ubuntugogical, we are seeking the well-being of students and all life on the planet. So recall that with pedagogy, the focus was on skill development, which manifests itself within the tooling function. But with ubuntugogical, there's more. We want to develop your character because it is the social cognition that is important rather than the individual cognition. How do you behave with others? How do you manage yourself within the group? How are your actions contributing to the development of the group and the growth of the group? And so developing your character through the lens of ma'at, which is truth. You always, always, always seek the truth. Justice, righteousness, order, balance, harmony, all of those elements create your character. And it'll manifest itself through how you socialize, how you function socially. And thus, when those elements are in place, then we know that you're going to use your skills and your tools in a straight, upright manner because you have good character. When you remove character development and you focus only on knowledge and skill development, then you can take that knowledge and skills and use the tools that you've been equipped with to do harm to others. And so to avoid that, we teach character development. So what are the available resources for us to start that shift? Well, we do have the rubric. We have manpower. We have technology. And we have our African spirit. Now, with the rubric, we would look at what curricular materials are out there, what instructional approaches and techniques that are out there that support the three tenets of religiosity, consensus building, and dialogue. And we can look, does the material advance religiosity? Does it advance consensus building? Does it advance dialogue? Or does it ignore it? Or does it hinder it? Now, the constraints. African centered resources are limited. Moreover, professors and teachers of African descent have limited abilities to think with our African minds. African professors, teachers, and teacher educators are currently equipped with pedagogical practices that continue to serve the CMP, the colonial matrix of power. So, how do we achieve the desired goals with the available resources and given current constraints? Well, first of all, epistemological decolonization as decoloniality is needed to clear the way for new intercultural communication for an interchange of experiences and meanings. A co-op of ubuntugogs trained in the three tenets of ubuntugogy internationally is needed in order to de-link from coloniality, construct our re-existence as true Africans, and relink to our African indigenous knowledge, resulting in our African ability to rebuild Africa and re-emerge as liberated Africans. Finally, a platform of open educational resources that houses African-centered lessons and instructional materials is under development. This platform will help facilitate the urgent task of deconstructing, reconstructing, and regenerating African knowledge. Thank you.